People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
In 1974, a motion picture shocked the world. It has become one of the most acclaimed and successful films in history. The Exorcist is a classic in its own time. And now, Warner Brothers takes you a step beyond. Exorcist II, The Heretic. Starring Linda Blair, Richard Burton, Louise Fletcher, Max von Sydow, James Earl Jones. Their minds locked together with the most terrifying vision of all. Exorcist II, The Heretic.
Hey folks, welcome to a very special episode of The Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. On this episode, I am talking with David Kittredge, who has been a co-host on this show many, many times. Ever since the very first time he was on the show, he was talking about a documentary he was working on, which at the time was called Heretics. It is now called Boorman and the Devil. And it is making the round at festivals. Just played the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival, has played at Beyond Fest, played at Venice, and is coming to, hopefully, a neighborhood near you very soon. It was great finally sitting down and talking about the movie. I've seen it. It's fantastic. Had a lot of fun with it. I would highly recommend it to everyone out there. And of course, I asked David when he first got the idea of starting to work on this.
In 2017, my friend Jeffrey Schwartz, who's a documentary filmmaker, he's done a lot of really great documentaries. I Am Divine is my favorite. He did Vito. He did Hab Hunter Confidential. He did one called Boulevard a couple of years ago. A really fantastic one on William Castle. I had no thought to actually making a documentary because I know how much work they are. They are a lot of work. You take a normal narrative film and you multiply it by another normal narrative film, and that's what a documentary is. And he was on me to do a documentary about Exorcist II because he knew I loved the film so much. And, I've been obsessed with it since my 20s. He basically said to me one night, I was over at his place, we were watching a movie or something. And he said, if you don't make this documentary, no one ever will. And I was really irritated because I knew he was right. I knew that Boorman was getting up there, Louise and Rospo and other people, they were all getting up there, and I knew it. I knew they were approaching their 80s or in their 80s. In Boorman's case, he was well into his 80s. And so he said, if I could get you contact with Boorman, would you consider making this documentary? I was just like, I get to talk to John Boorman? Sure. I'm a fan. I think Excalibur is a masterpiece. I think Point Blank is an insanely amazing film. The General, Hope and Glory, I could just go on. At any rate, what happened was Jeffrey had made a documentary involving Paul Verhoeven. And there's an author who wrote a book about Paul Verhoeven, but he also wrote a book about John Boorman. So Jeffrey knew this guy well. I think he's in Ireland. And I wrote him an email basically saying, can you forward this to John Boorman? He did. John Boorman wrote me back, and I was like, what? John Boorman just wrote me an email? And basically what happened was we started talking, and we had a Skype call where we were like Zooming, but that old thing called Skype that doesn't exist anymore, thanks to Microsoft. Basically, at the end of it, I said, would you be okay with me coming to Ireland and shooting you for an interview? And he said yes. And then that was when I knew, okay, I had to do this. Why? I could not live with myself if I didn't do this. And I had a friend of mine named Carson Gaspar, who's been my friend for decades. Literally, like, we were little 20-something gay boys running around New York at one point in the 90s. And he lent me a little money which I still have to pay him back, and I will pay him back if this movie gets distributed. I really wanted to. And yeah, I went to Ireland. We got a crew. I shot John for a day. It was a full day. And I left with an interview that I knew that interview was important and special. I was like, this is one of the great filmmakers. And it wasn't just talking about The Heretic. We were talking about all of his other work. We were talking about how he kind of came up. We were talking about his views on cinema today. He gave me anecdotes on all of these filmmakers, most of which did not make it into the cut because there was just so much. And I knew that I needed to tell the story. I literally felt like I could make a documentary just on Boorman's interview, but we were lucky enough the next one was Linda Blair, and she said yes once she heard that we got John. And I had to reassure both of them that this was not some kind of an Exorcist, oh, look at the bad movie, we get to make fun of people movie. This snide golden turkey bullshit. And I think what convinced John was I brought up Black Narcissus, the Powell and Pressburger movie, because one of the things that Exorcist 2 did very consciously was he shot almost the whole movie on sound stages, including exteriors, including African exteriors, like this African village. These were all in sound stages. And it's this weird vibe that it's not realistic, but you're in that reality anyway. And the movie that it reminded me the most of was the Black Narcissus by Pressburger. And I mentioned that, and I did not know this, he was a huge Pressburger fan. And I guess I could have put that together. He's a British filmmaker, and they were one of the most important filmmaking duos in British film. Are still, I think, possibly the most underrated filmmakers that have ever been behind a camera. They had a run of those 4 films that were just like Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, Black Narcissus, The Red Shoes, A Matter of Life and Death. Just those 4. They also made other good movies, but those 4 films are such bulletproof, honest to goodness, top 100 masterpieces. There are almost no directors that I think have done anything like that. Kubrick, Hitchcock, we're talking about the greats. Anyway, he vibed on the fact that I got the Black Narcissus reference because it was something he was inspired by, that film, Black Narcissus. Once we got Linda, we got Louise Fletcher, and then we got Roscoe Pallenberg. And then the pandemic happened, and we were unable to shoot anybody for almost 2 years. So it was just a long process. So all in all, going back to 2017, we didn't shoot Boorman until early 2018, but it's over 7 years. It's almost 8 years. They say documentaries take a long time. I thought it was going to take like maybe 2 or 3 years when I was starting. But the double whammy of the pandemic and the fact that I basically had to take edit jobs to keep the lights on. I'm not rich, and this money was coming from mostly me. We had a couple of donors from wealthy friends because we set up a film collaborative. And one of the things it offers to sponsor a film for finance. So they're a nonprofit. The film collaborative is a nonprofit. So what this person with money would do was they would give money to the film collaborative for my movie. The film collaborative has to approve it first because there's this whole thing where they have to make sure it's for real. They have to make sure it's a worthy project because their mission is to help make films that are worthy. It's a whole thing. And I had to submit a lot of stuff, but I got approved. And then these people, they would donate to the film collaborative, then assign 95% of that money to the film and then keep 5% for overhead for their nonprofit. In this way, these people, because it's always a crapshoot whether anything's going to pay back. Most independent films, almost all independent films, do not make their money back, especially documentaries. They get a tax break because they donate to charity, and then the movie gets the money and everybody's happy. So we got some money that way. But yeah, it just took a really long time because I had my producers, Jim Fall and Travis Stevens, who were helping, but I was the only editor on this film. I was the only director, the only writer, the only editor. 90-something% of the work came from me. And I don't feel bad about saying that. I think Travis and Jim would agree. But they were invaluable partners in this too. They helped me so much because the journey of this film, the last 2 years was the most difficult because in August of 2023, we had our first rough assembly. I had cut a first rough assembly. I think I even told you that, Mike. And it was 196 minutes. This was the version of the movie with everybody's stories in it. Everybody had stories. Like the thing with this movie, when we talked to the crew members and we talked to the actors and we did all this, these people have had huge careers. All of these people, The Heretic was a very early film for a lot of these people that I talked to, but they remembered it like it was yesterday. This was a shoot, and these are people who have done so many movies and TV shows, you just can't even count. Like you look at it's like, it scrolls forever, but they remember The Heretic and they remember John. This was a very special and particular production and shoot. And everybody remembered it like it was yesterday. Like it was unbelievable. And I got such amazing stories, like such detailed, amazing stories. And so the 196-minute version was the version with all of the stories. And I tested it with a few friends. And basically the response was very surprising because everybody said at no time were they ever bored. Ever. And 196 million, I'm like, wow, that's an achievement. Wow, I must be a good editor or something. I don't know. But it was like the equivalent, when we got back, it's like the equivalent of going to a really good restaurant and getting 3 or 4 amazing entrees. And it was just too much. It was like, it's all great, but we need to be shaping this. And I felt a real responsibility, especially after the interview with John, I felt a real responsibility to tell the story of this film and kind of the milieu around it that allowed it to happen the way it did, which was very particular and significant. And that is a lot of the crux of the movie. I think you and I, Mike, talked about this. It's like, this movie is not really about Exorcist 2. It's about it. There's all the stories, and this is like the foundation that the movie is, but it's really about the insanity of making movies, how much it takes to make a movie, and this period in Hollywood that an auteur like Boorman could be given the biggest budget in Warner Brothers history. Just think about that. It is the biggest budget in Warner Brothers history to make a sequel to the biggest movie in the studio's history and the 3rd highest grossing movie of all time, The Exorcist, which is iconic. It rewrote the book on horror, and John Boorman did this movie, which is so different. It's not even a horror movie. It's a different genre. That kind of audacity is, I don't know if I've ever seen it in any other movie. And it's not just the movie, it's the fact that it was made at a big studio on a huge budget and was a big summer release. This is an art movie. This is like a surreal art movie and a sequel to The Exorcist. It didn't fit. And that's why it was infamous and rejected, and people were throwing stuff at the screen. The whole story of this movie is, I feel, just one of the most amazing Hollywood stories, and no one had told it, which is why the last 2 years of cutting it down from 196 minutes to 111 minutes, which is the final cut, was just so hard. It made me a better editor, but I went way past my own limits. I think back to all the work I did on this, it's like, I can't even wrap my head around it. Now here we are, the film played at the Venice Film Festival, which is a dream. I could only dream that it would have gotten into the Venice Film Festival. And we had our big premiere out here in LA for Beyond Fest, which was the North American premiere. And next week, I'm flying to New York to be at the Brooklyn Horror Festival, which is the East Coast premiere. And it's bouncing around the world. I think it played in France and Norway, and it's going to play in Poland. So I feel like I can say without arrogance, like, I really feel like this is a great movie. And I don't feel like I can completely take credit for it. So many things fell into line on this movie I had nothing to do with. And the most you could credit me with is identifying them and making sure they were in the cut. That's really it. Boorman, to be that vulnerable and that open and talking about his life and as an artist and cinema, if you love movies, you need to hear this. I'm not just saying that to promote my movie. I feel like it's important. I feel like this is a great artist talking about one of the newest art forms in human history. And I think what he says is really valuable. And what he says about living as an artist really moved me and shook me to my core. And I think that the people who watched the film, a lot of people feel the same way. There were people crying at the end of screenings. And one of them came up to me, if you ever told me I was going to be crying at the end of a screening about the making of Exorcist 2, I'd have thought you were crazy, because it's not really about that. It's about this man, this great artist, making this vision, and it absolutely is just a catastrophe, but something comes out of it. It redefined how he made movies. It redefined how he viewed movies. And the movie he made after it, Excalibur, I genuinely think is John Boorman's finest work. And it's a work of fury. It's a work of a man who has something to prove, who made one of the most public and catastrophic studio releases in history. And he really wanted to show people that he can make movies. Like, he made Deliverance. He was called all the names in the book.
It's obvious his love for film comes through with that interview and with all of the things that he faced and had to struggle through, being sick for 6 weeks and having to shut down production.
In the middle of production, John Boorman gets a high fever and a rash all over his body. And he's taken into the ICU. He almost dies. They give him spinal taps. I literally saw the hospital bills at the University of Indiana, where I was looking through his papers. I know, Mike, you've been there. The man almost died, and they shut down this major studio production for 5 weeks, which was a huge deal because they were locked into a release date for reasons that are totally different, and it comes down to how the movie was financed, which is a whole nother story. But the way that this movie was financed, this movie literally was one of the things that led to it being legislated out of existence. That was the impact of this movie. It was like a neutron bomb. It was just like everything in its wake suffered.
The love that he had or has for film, the passion, that comes out from him. But what comes out even more is the passion that you have for this project. And that passion that you have from the very first conversation you and I ever had back in either 2017 or 2018.
It was one of those 2017. Yeah, Mike, you were one of the first people I told. I'm just like, I don't know if I'm going to do this, but somehow I just feel like I need to make this movie. Which is interesting because I have all these projects in front of me that people are, I'm trying to figure it out, but it's like, what do I feel that strongly about that I feel like about Exorcist 2? And it's, I don't know, it might take a few weeks to just meditate on it. I can't even tell you why I love Exorcist 2 so much. It's not even the movie, because I understand the issues this movie has. I don't disagree. Boorman would agree that this movie doesn't work, at least totally. But the audacity and the fact that they took these risks, these crazy risks with this project on such a huge scale. It's either gutsy or stupid. I prefer to look at it as gutsy. But my God, I don't know if you know a lot of artists, but I know a lot of artists. And there's always these things where they're like afraid to do this. They're afraid to do this project. Oh, how will this get made? Oh, if I do this, then no one will try to finance it or whatever. And it's just, I wanted to make this movie for those filmmakers who are just despondent and dissatisfied and like they don't know what the answer is. You got to do that thing that you need to do, and it doesn't fucking matter what you think is going to happen or not happen, whether it's going to get bought or like you're going to be able to raise money. That you have to do it anyway. That's what an artist is. Like, there are just some things that you just need to do in life, and this for me was one of them. And I'm still trying to decompress from it. I'm not quite there. It was a lot just to get it ready for Venice, and then we had to tweak some stuff and go back in the mix before Beyond Fest. And right now where I'm cutting teasers and stuff for our sales reps to pitch to distributors and stuff. But yeah, it's ongoing. I'm still busy working on it, hoping that it's over soon.
When did the title change from Heretics to Boorman and the Devil?
I think that was probably mid 2024 or late 2024. And the reason was very practical. It's because that Hugh Grant movie called Heretic, which I hear is good. I haven't seen it, but I hear it's good. It was up for a BAFTA. So it was not like a little release. Like, people have seen this film. And basically the point was, it was always Heretics : something. Heretics, Brushed by the Wings of Exorcist 2, Heretics, The Brilliant Disaster of Exorcist 2, or Heretics, John Boorman, whatever. It was always that. But changing it from Heretics did two things. One is we got away from the Hugh Grant movie, at least. But in a lot of the test screenings, people who were expecting a making of movie were really thrown by the first, I don't know, like 30 minutes. Because the first 30 minutes of the movie really is about John and the movies he made going up to the Heretic. And so people were like, why are we seeing all of this? We just want to see Exorcist 2. I'm just like, yeah, it's not about that. It's about all of this. It's about Boorman making it. It's not about the movie itself. It's about Boorman and the journey through to make it. So when we changed it to Boorman and the Devil, and we had a really long list, by the way, of titles, and I was not sold on Boorman and the Devil for a really long time. I was just like, oh, it sounds like I mean, people were telling me to do The Devil and John Boorman, and that sounded too much like The Devil and Daniel Webster. And I was just like, which is a great movie, by the way, but it has no bearing, just no similarity between this movie and that movie. And I just liked Boorman and the Devil. I was like, all right. And I started kicking it around. And then when we showed it to a test audience with that title, we immediately lost all of the snotty notes from people about like, why is this more about Exorcist 2? And we lost all of them simply because we changed the title. And I was like, that was nice. That's good. I thought I was going to have to do some kind of editing jujitsu because we were trying to figure out like, oh, do we do it so that we just start with Heretic and then we pepper in his stuff? And I'm like, no, that doesn't make any sense. And it's going to be confusing. And yeah, trust me, we tried every sort of edit. We tried to address all of the significant notes, which are like the notes that we would get more than once or twice. And it was just a lot. It was a lot of testing. We tested it, probably 16 or 17 times over those 2 years. Different cuts, everything from the first 196-minute cut. I think the lowest cut we did was 102 minutes. And it was a lot of taking stuff out, putting stuff back, condensing stuff, rearranging stuff, changing the order of stuff. It's surprising, though, the vast majority of the movie that's in there was pretty much in there in the first cut, like the sections. They were all longer. Like we have a section on Zardoz, and your first cut was like 4 minutes or something. And it was just like, there's no way you can do that in this movie. 4 minutes is a very long time, even for something if I love Zardoz, and I love Zardoz. But I think the final version, I think it's like a couple minutes instead, and goes through that whole thing. And Rose Portillo, who plays the actress who burns up in the first scene of Exorcist 2, has a very funny story. But in the first cut, she had, I think, 3 stories. And of course, they were all in there. We were like, okay, which of these 3 stories? And we kept the one where she was freaking out because she was set on fire. That's a very funny scene. She was protected. They didn't intentionally set her on fire in a bad way, but it was still a pretty dangerous stunt.
It must have been pretty painful to go from that 190-some minute cut down to what you have. What were some of the most painful things that you had to lose?
The most painful thing I had to lose was there was a small section with Linda Blair talking about her reviews for The Heretic. And this happened after the film had come out. And we took it out because basically it stopped the movie at a dead halt. The movie was going and going, and then the scene comes up, and it's very serious because these reviews, the things that I highlight were basically talking about her body. Like, she's fat, she's unattractive, or whatever. There were 6 or 7 of these, like, really repellent, I'm sorry, she was 17. She was a minor. There is no justification for any of that shit. And all of those critics, I had them big, bold in the lower third. I was like, and I'm sure because some of them are not around anymore, but I'm like, fuck these people. This is not a fucking review. You are mocking a 17-year-old actor's appearance. And if you look at her in the film, it's just radiant. I don't know what they're talking about. She has a little bit of like baby fat in her face, but it's ridiculous. And she had to deal with that along with everything else. She had to deal with that. And basically it was her saying people were very mean. And we just see these reviews come up on the screen. No music. It's dead silent. Like just the reviews, like she's ugly. She has chipmunk fat. She's whatever. And then I cut back to Linda and she goes, and that was my life at 17. And it was really powerful. And every single test audience, all of the women in the test audience were like, it was like very powerful. And it absolutely killed me to cut that because it was like film criticism is really important. And film critics right now are in a lot of trouble, and that sucks. But I think there was a time in the 70s where they were almost all straight, almost all white, almost all male. And you know what? A lot of them were not terribly kind people, it feels. I do not know these people personally, but just reading their reviews, I don't know how you can love cinema and take delight in ripping apart a movie. You know, and there are a lot of movies I dislike, but I'm not going to run around and be like, that person can't act. Thank God, because those guys, those people who do that, I doubt if any one of them did one fucking thing in their life to put themselves out there as much as any of those people who made that movie. And that killed me. And then there were a few other things. I had a little bit where, because Roscoe Pallenberg, the writer that John brought onto the project, and John worked on an adaptation of Lord of the Rings in 1971 or 1970, and condensing all 3 books into one 4-hour script. It was going to be a 4-hour movie with an intermission. And what Boorman wanted to do was to get around the Hobbit thing, he wanted to cast like 9 or 10-year-old boys, put fake beards on them, dub them with male adult voices, and that would be the Hobbits, and put hair on their feet and hands. And even Boorman telling this story starts laughing because he's like, this wouldn't have worked. It would have been a calamity. But that was the idea. And so that's a very funny moment, but we just had to lose it. We had to, because the whole thing about cutting down this movie to its length, which is, I think, the right length, it's just a little under 2 hours. So it's not like it's a short. The last section of this movie is very moving, and it's Boorman talking about his life and Boorman talking about art. And he's talking about it somewhat in the past tense. And it moves me a lot when I see it. Louise Fletcher also has a bit at the end where she talks about how life is like one big spaghetti dinner. There's good and bad, and it moves everybody. And the idea in cutting it down is I needed the audience to not be exhausted by the time all of this happened. So when they're watching it, they're still engaged and moved, and they're not just exhausted and want to go home. And it's very moving, but I want it to end. It just took a lot to get to that point. You need to do a lot of streamlining and making sure things move. Most of my editorial background, or at least most of the bills that I've been paying for the last 20 years, have come from short form, which is like trailers and promos and commercials and like stuff that aren't features. So that is a very specific kind of editing. It's very varsity level, and it's very hard to do well, which I'm very happy to say that is how I got paid these years. I basically wanted to cut this movie, not like a commercial, not cut that fast, but it had to move. And because there's just so much in it, it has to move quickly. And the editing style that I used in this film, I think I couldn't have done had I not had all that experience and had the experience with Brian Fuller on Queer for Fear for Shudder, which I was lead editor on. And that was like a 2+ year project that I was working with him on to make those episodes. And that made me a better editor. So it was really all about not exhausting the audience and keeping the pace up. You can think it's not some kind of what do they call them? Max Headroom blipvert. I know I'm dating myself by saying Max Headroom. Nobody knows. Does anybody know what Max Headroom was? Yeah, you do. We do. But I don't, it's whatever. It's the 80s. It was actually a really cool show. I have the DVDs in the other room. It's not some kind of like ADD cut film. But it had to move. I have a thing about documentaries that are a little navel-gazy. I don't like them. And I find that a lot of them are. Not all, but too many. And I feel like you got to entertain the audience. You got to take them on a ride.
So Boorman was the first person you interviewed for this one. Who was the last person?
The last person was Mike Flanagan. We shot Mike Flanagan in January of this year, of 2025. He was a very late addition because he saw a cut of the film without him, of course. He really loved it. At the time, I think he still is. I don't know the status of this project, but he had been hired by Blumhouse to do the next Exorcist sequel. I know that's been on and off, so I don't know where we're at with that. I do know that they should do it because I think he is ideal for this, and I think he understands it so well. In the conversation I had with him, I heard the basic gist, the basic pitch of the plot of this sequel, and I was like, I would see that now. Please let me see that now. I want to see that. He had an appreciation of Exorcist 2 similar to mine, which is that it doesn't work completely, but it's really cool. There's some stuff in it that's really cool, and it's audacious, and it's different, and I would actually say it's never boring. That movie is just bonkers, but it's visually so stunning, and the music is so insane by Ennio Morricone. The soundtrack is phenomenal. You just have to divorce yourself from thinking that it's actually a sequel to The Exorcist, which is hard because they keep referring to it in the movie, including like a Beyond the Grave performance from Max von Sydow as Father Merrin, and Sharon, the caretaker's in it, and of course Linda. And it's all about what happened in that room. And it's just, if you saw the first movie, what happened in that room. But then we have to get there, and Richard Burton plays the priest, and he's his own thing. He's in his own movie in this movie. I actually personally think that he's probably the biggest liability in the film. Like, if there's something that doesn't work in this film, and I like Richard Burton a lot. I think he's a great actor, but there's a disconnect here that I don't know if the movie can get past.
Yeah, your critiques of his acting are really spot on with some of the line deliveries that he gives. And
I also heard all the stories. There's a whole section in the documentary about like Burton and how problematic he was.
Well, it's funny because there's that whole discussion, I believe, of the rehearsals.
Yeah, the read through.
Yeah, and like just over the last few weeks, I've heard about several other British actors that just kind of refuse to do any sort of read-throughs, rehearsals, or anything. And it's just like...
Burton didn't refuse. He just passive-aggressively pranked them all. What he would do, basically, and this is revealed in the film, Louise Fletcher tells this story, is he basically kept running to the bathroom and then say it was because his stomach was always bad when he traveled or something. So he'd bolt up and run to the bathroom, and he started late and he finished without him. And then Louise Fletcher learned years later that he pulls this every time they do a read-through because he resents the fact that he has to be there so much. My own personal view is that if you're going to get paid $750,000 in 1976 to be in the sequel to The Exorcist, the least you can do is sit your ass down and read the lines. But, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like the ghost of Richard Burton is going to just smack me at some point. I do love Richard Burton, but he was not a really good contributor to this film, and I think the film suffers as a result.
So after all of this hard work that you put into it, when was the first time you saw it with a proper audience? Was that actually at Venice?
No, that was Venice, yeah.
What was that experience like for you?
Being at the Venice Film Festival and being a film that was selected, Venice is a top 5 festival. Venice is up there with Cannes, it's up there with Sundance, it's up with Toronto, Berlin, Telluride. Those are like, you premiere at one of these festivals, it's like getting into Harvard. It's it's really hard to get into one of these festivals. I don't know what percentage, it's extremely low. Sometimes producers know programmers. My producer, Travis Stevens, has had several movies running around, and he knew a programmer in Toronto, but we knew nobody at Venice. And we submitted for Venice, and I did not think we had a chance in hell. And that's not to put me or the movie down. It's just the fact that after you're at a certain quality level, it really just depends on whoever's watching it. And they only have a few slots. Our lineup was in the Venice Classic slot, which is basically movies about movies. So they have, I don't know how many, dozens and dozens of movies about movies. For us to get one of the 6 slots or whatever it was, is okay, that's a lot. And I think only 4 of them were American, and then there were a few from other countries. I didn't see many films in Venice. So to get into Venice was tremendous. So we get there, all of the Venice Classics titles premiere at the end of the festival because I think they just do all the other premieres, the big movies, The Hunt with Julia Roberts and Jay Kelly, George Clooney, and Smashing Machine with The Rock. These are all big splashy things. So we premiered on, I think, the second to last day of the festival, and it was a sold out show. I think the theater had 300 something seats, and I go out there and maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of the seats are filled and sold out. But it's so late in the festival that only the diehards are there. And I could look at the audience and there was this exhaustion, and these people had obviously seen 27 movies in the last week, and they're here for another one. But the response was really good. It was a little bit muted, but like people laughed and people were with it, and a lot of people came up to me after, and that was really nice. But the Beyond Fest screening in LA, we sold out the Arrow in Santa Monica, which is a beautiful historic theater. If you ever saw Donnie Darko, the interior of the theater, that was the Arrow. And to have that screening, it was programmed with a double feature of Exorcist II, The Heretic. So our doc came first, then there was a Q&A, then they screened a 35 millimeter print, Martin Scorsese's 35 millimeter print, because Martin Scorsese loves Exorcist II, The Heretic. I'm dying for him to see my movie. If anybody knows how to get to him, please let me know. I think he'd really like it. But that crowd laughing all through it, like reacting. There were people in tears at the end. It was the kind of reaction that every filmmaker just dreams of. And for me to get it after having worked in this industry for decades as editor and all the stuff, and just seeing a lot of my friends have movies at Sundance and have movies at South by and have big whatever, and they have agents and little, I'm just doing my thing and I'm editing. For me to be suddenly in that position is really, it's crazy. And I am so grateful. I'm so grateful that, and I'm grateful not only to the people who love the film, I'm grateful just for the people who helped me make it and the people in it. There was just so much of this film that was not in my control. It just happened, or people were just, they chose to be open and vulnerable and share things that it was a gift. It's just a gift. And it's funny, like I was working with Brian Fuller. Of course, Brian Fuller's huge. He created the Hannibal show. He has this movie, Dust Bunny, which is really great. And I worked for him for Queer for Fear for 2.5 years. And suddenly our movies are going to the same festivals all over the place. And it's crazy. Like Brooklyn Horror Fest, like next week. And I think Dust Bunny is playing the day after. And it went to Tell You Right Horror. And we're both playing in Ireland. And it's like everywhere that Boorman and the Devil is playing, Dust Bunny seems to be playing. And Brian's like texting me, like, we're festival buddies. And I'm just like, I mean, Brian's a friend, but it's, wow, I'm like a peer now. That's like crazy to me. And it's a weird mind shift. And I would be lying if I told you I completely have processed it. I haven't. I'm still in a very weird and somewhat burnt out, but very vulnerable place with regard to all of this. Because it's like everybody, like I'm getting emails from Edgar Wright and Sean Baker about how much they love this movie. And yet, to be completely honest, I'm going to pay my bills in 6 months. Like every filmmaker. But that's the way it is. You get a gig and then you're on that and whatever, but I don't know what's next. I have projects. I'm going to be pitching and trying to put stuff together, but who knows? It's a weird time in the entertainment industry. And that's a whole nother podcast we can talk about. But I know an awful lot of people who haven't worked for a while or who have not worked enough, mostly since the strikes, but it's not a product of the strikes. The strikes just precipitated it. It's because the streamers stopped growing with that exponential growth. And everybody saw a ceiling. And once you see a ceiling to these products, it's okay, how much can we spend? And I don't think any of the big media companies expected it to hit its ceiling at this point, or as low as it was. They all had projections that it was, because before the strikes, it was like everything was in production. Everybody was working because they were trying to refill their coffers and they were trying to get as much shot as possible, get as much written as possible. And the industry hasn't recovered. And it's very scary. There are a lot of very talented people who find themselves, like after multi-decade careers, unable to pay the bills, which is not a place that anybody in that world thought they'd ever be. Because when you're a key grip or when you're a second assistant camera, these are very specialized fields and these are very specialized jobs. They don't really translate a lot to a lot of other things. And they've spent years and years getting to their point, getting to their stature, and they make decent money. All of these below the line people, including me along with everybody in the entertainment industry, is like looking, okay, is production going to come back? It's starting to, but we're still nowhere near the point we were before the strikes.
We talked a little bit about your first interview and your last interview. Who was the toughest one to get?
I'm really fortunate because after the first 4 interviews, which was Boorman, Rospo, Linda, and Louise, were the 4 biggies. I cut a sizzle reel for the whole project. It was like 8 minutes. And when I would show people that all those people were in it, there were almost no no's, especially with the crew. The crew were like, I don't even think I had to show them this thing. It made it like, okay, you're for real. There's John. Oh, there's Louise. Oh, there's Linda. Oh, there's Rospo, whatever. So who was the most difficult to get? Honestly, it was Joe Dante was difficult to get, but that was only because we couldn't find a way to get to him. We tried through social media and we tried through this or we tried through that. And the way that we finally got to him was my downstairs neighbor, Ed Herrera, who ended up shooting the last 2 interviews. knows producer John Davidson, the legendary producer of Airplane and RoboCop and a lot of other movies. And he and Dante are friends, and they would screen stuff because they're total film nerds. And so Ed saw a cut of, because Dante was a later, I forget when it was, but he was one of the later ones. I want to say it was like 2024. And Ed saw a cut. I think he was in a test audience. And he was just like, Joe Dante should be in this. I'm like, dude, I would love Joe Dante to be in it, because he literally went into film comment 80s and said, Exorcist 2, The Heretic is actually a good movie and it should be taken seriously. Like, the only two filmmakers who did that, it was Scorsese and Joe Dante. And we tried for Scorsese and he was impossible to get, which was a bummer because I really, really wanted Martin Scorsese to be in this. Who wouldn't? You're doing a documentary. Why would you not want Martin Scorsese? Especially if it's a movie he has gone on record and said, this is underrated. So much so he has a print of it. But Joe Dante, we finally did get to him, and he was really sweet, and he basically let us shoot him for a few hours, and we got some fantastic lines from him, which really helped a few of the bits. Because that was the point. It was later, we only had Karin Kusama as a filmmaker, and I was just like, we need more filmmakers. We need more like established name filmmakers. And once we got Joe and then we got Mike, and that feels right. That's okay. We're good on the filmmaker justifying what we're doing kind of moment. And we had it like the same way we had a trio of critics. We had a Greek chorus of critics with Bilga Ibiri of New York Magazine, Simon Abrams, and Stephanie Zacharek of Time. And they walk us through the beginning part with the Hollywood New Wave and how Exorcist 2 is more like a Hollywood New Wave movie than a sequel. One of the most annoying criticism of Exorcist 2, and the one I want my documentary to upend the most, is people say that it was a cash grab. A lot of the critics at the time were just like, oh, it's a cash in. The studio made them do this cash in. Exorcist 2, The Heretic is literally, I feel, the opposite of it. They could have so easily, John Calley and Ted Ashley and Warner Brothers easily could have made a movie without Linda Blair, with another possessed kid, or even with Linda Blair, she gets possessed again, or somebody else gets, whatever. It would have been so easy to do that. And they very purposefully and consciously went as far astray from that as possible. They wanted to do a much bigger thing. They wanted to do a prestige movie. The Exorcist was nominated for Best Picture. They wanted Exorcist the Heretic to be nominated for Best Picture. That was the mentality. Like, they wanted to make something great. So it's like, all the people who like piss on this movie and say it's a cash grab, you can say it's awful, like whatever. I mean, if you just want a movie that's like The Exorcist, you're not going to like this movie ever. It's absolutely the opposite of all of it. But as a piece of art, which I think cinema is, watching it on its own terms, in its own logic, in its own weird dream logic that is arched and heightened and sometimes laughable a little bit, but it's very consistent. I think it's a worthy film for anybody who loves cinema, and especially anybody who wants to learn about Hollywood in the 70s.
When we originally were talking about things, that was how you're really framing stuff, especially this whole idea of like the end of auteur cinema and that weird / magical time in Hollywood where all of these directors were able to make these passion projects for better or for worse.
Mostly for better. Like, even the ones that tanked, Exorcist 2 was one of the first ones that went down. Before that, I think it was just At Long Last Love, Bogdanovich's musical, which you can watch it. It has its moments. I know a lot of, like, my friend, the filmmaker Jim Fall, who did the Lizzie McGuire movie and a lot of other movies, loves At Long Last Love. He demanded that I rewatch it because I was like, I couldn't get through it. And I rewatched it. I'm like, okay, it's good. But like the Missouri Breaks, Arthur Penn's movie, Sorcerer, Friedkin's movie, Sorcerer cost way more than Exorcist 2 and grossed way less than Exorcist 2. And yet everybody thinks Exorcist 2 is the biggest bomb in existence. No, actually, Sorcerer lost everybody a lot more money than Exorcist 2 ever did. 1941, Spielberg's movie. Again, not a huge financial bomb. And I think it broke even, but certainly it's considered one. And it led all the way to Heaven's Gate. And Heaven's Gate was the bomb of all bombs. It was the mother of all bombs because it was a bomb that literally destroyed a studio. Like, United Artists was literally basically destroyed by this film. The name still stood, but all of the people who had anything to do with it to make it United Artists left and had to leave, or they were fired. It's been a while since I've read Final Cut, the Stephen Bach book about the making of Heaven's Gate. It's a great book. But basically, United Artists after Heaven's Gate was a different thing. It was not under Arthur Krim and all those guys. And United Artists, like the Rocky, just so many movies and so many great films. And that one movie just destroyed it, like utterly destroyed it. And so all of the studios from then on were like, okay, that whole thing's done. And it was the 1-2 punch of that. And years before it, Star Wars, which really changed everything. Star Wars, which literally came out 3 weeks before Exorcist 2 did. And we're battling for the same box office money. It's just such an important time. The Hollywood New Wave, which started basically in 1967-ish with Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde was the thing that kind of kicked it off. The Graduate came out, I think, the same year. There's a wonderful book by Mark Harris called Pictures at a Revolution. If you're interested in cinema, you need to read it. Basically, all it does is it takes the 5 Best Picture nominees from 1967, which were, I'm going to fuck this up, but I'm going to try. It was The Graduate, Bonnie and Clyde, In the Heat of the Night, Guess Who's Coming to There, and Dr. Dolittle. And basically, it's a deep dive on all 5 of those movies. In the Heat of the Night ended up winning, but it's basically like how there was this radical shift because the number one movie of 1967, it's The Graduate. Now, The Graduate's a great movie. We can all look at it and be like, oh, it's a great movie, but it's like, watch that movie. That is not like a mainstream quote unquote movie. That is a very edgy, subversive, whoa, what is this movie? And one of the reasons that I so wanted to do this documentary, it's like, that's what we need now. I want to see movies that are interesting. I was interviewed for The Guardian. There's a piece up on The Guardian on this whole thing. And I told the guy, I was just like, there are ways to look at any piece of art, and cinema is art. So you can either see, is it good in the sense, does it do the things that it sets out to do in the way it sets out to do them? And is it interesting? Is it trying to do things different? Or is it subverting your expectations? Is it doing something interesting, different? Is it taking a different point of view? Exorcist II, The Heretic does not succeed as being quote unquote good under this definition, but it is so interesting. And to me, where I'm at with cinema and where I think I've been at, it's like it is so much more important for a movie to be interesting than it is to be good. I just last week saw a film that's an Oscar bait film out here in LA in the theater, and it was good, but it was really not interesting. I never need to see this movie again. I can see that it's going to get good reviews, or it did get good reviews. It's perfectly effective at what it's trying to do, but there's nothing new or interesting. It's not taking any different anything. Like, it was exactly what one would expect from this thing. And I don't want to see any movies like that anymore. I just don't. You can take 10 movies that are fine that shoot for a base hit. I want to see the one that like tries to swing for the grand slam. And I don't even care if it connects or not. I want to see that swing. That's what I feel is interesting and valuable about cinema to me. And I think there are a lot of people who are just been anesthetized over the last 10 years with these extremely similar, like, Marvel movies. Now, I don't want to dump on Marvel. I actually don't dislike Marvel movies, but they are very formulaic. They all do follow a pattern. And after you've seen like 27 of these, it's just, dude, like, maybe something different. Maybe go to Criterion Channel, which is the best streaming service in the world, by the way. If you don't have it and you love movies, you're missing out. Watch a Brian De Palma movie. Watch Three Women by Robert Altman. That's a Dream Logic movie that, like, you can't even explain what that is. It's amazing. There's so many amazing movies, and they're so entertaining. And it makes me sad when I talk to especially younger people who are like, they don't know that there's this whole universe of fantastically amazing films that some of them don't work, but they will broaden your mind. Like, I've always argued, and I'm going to lose everybody that I'm talking to when I say this, but Southland Tales is a great film. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work. There's so many problems with it, but I love Southland Tales because it is just one scene with a big swing after one scene with a big swing after one scene with a big swing, and half of them don't work. But at no point in that movie was I not on the edge of my seat wondering where the hell this was going. There's so many movies like that. They're just dismissed. And yet those are the movies that I keep coming back to for inspiration. And again, they don't have to be good, but they have something. They tried something. That's what the documentary is about. That's what I believe. I want more people to try more stuff, not just in art, but in their lives. We're all hemmed in by like fear of what will happen or what's practical or what's not practical. And it's just, I think so many people I know got to get a little more bold. So much of our life is about dealing with fear. I don't feel like you can give into it. And once you do, what's the point? Like, you can make the decision right now to do that artistic project that you want to do. Right now, you can make that decision. And you know what? It doesn't have to be good, but it has to be sincere, and it has to have your energy, and it has to be the thing that you want to make, you need to make. And it doesn't matter if people laugh at it. It doesn't matter if the critics don't like it or whatever. It doesn't matter. We're here. That's what this is about. Make the thing that you most want to make. And honestly, I wish I could sometimes follow my own advice. Like, Lord knows, like, I could have given this speech to 24-year-old me, and I would have been like, yeah, but I would have had a lot of excuses. And it took me, I feel, too long to get to that place. And I know a lot of people that I know who are artists aren't in that place now, and they're in their like 50s and 60s. I'm just like, dude, what's left? What do you have to lose? Just do it. Do that thing. Write that script. Write that crazy script. Do that low-budget movie or no-budget movie. Like, you can do a no-budget movie now. Write the book. Do the graphic novel. Write the piece of music. Whatever. Doesn't matter. The internet gives us eternal distribution if you want that. You're an example of this. You started this podcast. This was something you wanted to do, and you felt it strongly. You've been at this for years. You have been doing amazing work looking at these movies that nobody, except for film nerds like me, know about, and people listen. It's like you can't predict what this is going to do or not do.
David, is there a good place for people to keep up with you in this movie so they can see it when it comes to a theater near them?
I would probably say Instagram at this point. I'm still on Facebook. You can do Facebook. I think Instagram is probably the best way. And I'm just at David Kittredge. It's my name. Yeah. I'm also on Blue Sky for those who are on Blue Sky. I think there are a few. And I believe that's my name too. But yeah, it's Instagram is, I think, where we're most regularly posting.
I have loved seeing all of these pictures coming out of the different, festivals and events and everything. It's been wonderful. So I'm just kind of here from afar looking at this and just enjoying the whole thing because you so deserve this great ride.
Thank you. Well, and I want to thank you because you were a huge help making this movie. I think you were actually the person who helped me get in touch with Louise, if I remember correctly. That was you. And was there anybody else? I don't think it was anybody else. It could have been, though.
Yeah, because I had also talked with that guy who wrote the book on Boorman, but I don't think I gave his his information.
Brian Hoyle, that's right.
Brian Hoyle, yeah. And I think you might have hooked me up with Rospo Pallenberg.
Oh, did I?
Yeah. It was an interesting guy, for sure, and he helped me with my Dune commentary because he wrote a draft of Dune.
He did very early on. That was because he worked for Dino De Laurentiis that whole time. And he took time off to work on The Heretic, and then he went back to Dino De Laurentiis after, I think. But he was definitely with Dino De Laurentiis for several years before. He was just the main, I don't know what his title was, but he basically gave notes on scripts and helped to develop stuff. I know he worked on King Kong because we had a lot of the interview that we did with him. He was talking about King Kong. But I want to say, yeah, you were a huge help. Like, you were a huge help. And not a lot of people knew I was doing this documentary. I told you, I told a few other people. And I want to thank you. You are thanked in the movie too, but I want to thank you and this podcast for just being such a wonderful inspiration to me. And I think other filmmakers too. It's not a little thing. It means a lot.
Well, I can't wait to see what happens next. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Congratulations on the film, my friend.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate it.